Okay, thank you everyone. Nice to be here. So I will talk to you about the installation or a project that we worked on to install the world's first permanent split mooring system. And I'll just take you through basically the timeline of the project and the solutions that we ended up engineering and implementing. So back in 2023, we were asked by ENI Congo to transport and install a mooring system that comprised of 2 floating units and a 17-line mooring arrangement. The field was offshore Congo, the Lichinjili field located approximately 2 kilometers from the shoreline in approximately 17 to 20 meter water depths. The design itself was quite a standard, or it was based on a standard catenary spread mooring system. But where it differed was that the mooring lines themselves were shared between the 2 floating units, and the floating units themselves were actually connected together by a series of hawsers. And this is precisely what is making this system unique and a world first to be implemented. The project itself was executed within a 12-month period. The first 3 months, kicking off late January, was a concept validation study where we had to prove the installability of the system in an offshore environment. During that installability study, we quickly established that a standard base case solution came with various risks and challenges and needed a separate sort of solution to be considered as well. So then when the concept validation was completed, we went into a detailed engineering phase, which was quite a long, drawn-out process, purely for the fact that we were working on 2 solutions. And from there, the final 3 months was purely operational. The reason for the aggressive schedule was that the client wanted their first gas by the end of the year in 2023, as usual in the industry. For this operation, we enlisted 5 main anchor handling vessels. Some of the names you'll probably have recognized from the presentations earlier. So we had Norman Draught, Prosper, Sapphire, Sigma, and Sirius. They were our 5 main anchor handling vessels that were performing the majority of the operations. Quite high-spec, state-of-the-art vessels. In addition to that, we also chartered 2 support tugs to support towing and station keeping and general activities as well. There were other vessels in field operational at the time as well, but those 7 kind of build up the main primary vessels that were used. You normally hear global operations probably a number of times when it comes to offshore executions in the oil and gas industry. This was truly global. We had engineering being performed out of our Aberdeen office, Stavanger and Oslo. We had vessels mobilized and stored and in Rotterdam, transited to Congo following that. We had in Dubai the upgrades of the FSU and FLNG, as well as installation of very large installation aids. We offloaded the FLNG in Luanda from a semi-sub heavy lift vessel, and then our in-country operations were based out of Point Noir. So truly global operations that we performed. So the base case solution that was our base case, our primary solution, was based on a typical methodology. And for that methodology, basically we prelay the mooring lines, tow out each of the floating units independently, one by one, connect up or recover and connect up the mooring lines to the units, tension them, and then the units are in operation. For the operation, the 2 units need to be at 25 meter separation, so that is their design separation when they're in operation. However, for the installation activities, the units needed to be at 15 meter hull-to-hull separation. The main reasons for that is when we were installing the hawsers through our assessment, we established that to be able to install the hawsers, which was effectively a cross-haul and pull-in operations, the loads were quite high, and to be able to keep the loads low and within the equipment that was already pre-installed onto the floating units by the client, the 2 units needed to be at 15 meter hull-to-hull. However, with structures protruding the sides, the steel-to-steel separation was actually more like 4 meters. So very small margins to play with. To be able to maintain that separation and also stop the two units colliding from one another, we needed fenders. We established that there weren't any fenders large enough to be able to keep that sort of separation, so then we realized we needed a frame. Our original plan was to procure a barge off the shelf, but then the compression loads that was estimated was too high for any barges on the shelf to be able to withstand, so we had to build a frame ourselves, design and build a frame, to which the fenders would then attach. To keep the frame afloat and not have the fenders act as a buoyancy element, we installed 4 marine salvage bags into the frame, and that kept the frame afloat and allowed the fenders to do what they were needed to do. The frame itself was significantly large. It was around 24 meters by 16.7 by 7.5 meters in dimensions. To put a little bit of context in that, an average 2-story house in the UK is about 12 to 14 meters by 7 to 8 meters by 6 to 7.5 meters, so significantly larger than an average 2-story house in the UK. Each fender was rated to 770 tons compression forces. So, as I mentioned, just to go through this very quickly, the base case solution was to pre-lay the mooring lines in an arrangement where they could be recovered, tow out each of the units independently, and first hook them up to initial mooring lines to allow control of the units, bring out the spacer frames with the fenders connected, and then bring out the second unit and connect it up to a minimum number of mooring lines. Then install the hawsers in between the two units, connect the remainder of the mooring lines, tension them all up, and then which would then bring them into their final position, and then they would be in an operational position. But there were 2 main significant challenges that we found with this base case solution when we were going through the engineering process. Both were related to the hawser installation. For the hawsers installation, we found that because it's a cross-haul and pull-in operation, in essence, when it came to the final stages of the pull-in, the loads were increasing exponentially, and so much so that they were actually exceeding the capacity of the pull-in equipment that was on the top sides of the units. So technically and practically, we weren't actually able to execute the base case solution with the equipment that was on board, and we had no opportunity to install larger equipment on board to overcome those larger loads. The second main problem, and that was actually the primary reason, not the technical one, was more of a practical and human element, which fits nicely in with the presentation that we just had recently, was the hawsers, and along with the hawsers, temporary lashings, etc., meant that there would be people working in very close proximity to lines that were under very large amounts of tension. And on occasion, it would have also meant that people would, so in the final stages of the pull-in, it required human intervention, so then people are in direct line of fire for these lines under human tension. So then we needed a solution that removed that risk away from an offshore environment and into an environment that was a lot more controlled. And although the risk of working around lines under high tensions were present, it was a little bit less and in a more controlled solution. So then that brought us onto the combined tow solution. We knew we needed to take these units, connect them up together in an environment where we weren't exposed to the swells and to the winds, etc. But what we didn't know was how to tow these 2 units out together. The combined tow solution wasn't met with the greatest of enthusiasms from a lot of our colleagues and our managers, and primarily because up until when we performed it, we never had any other real references where a tow of such form was performed on vessels as large as what we were proposing. And the only reference we could find was this reference here, which obviously didn't go down very well. So naturally, there was some apprehension and some hesitation. When we dug into the report of this case here, what was concluded was that there wasn't adequate planning and engineering that went into that operation there. Something that we were not doing ourselves, and was something we were not willing to do So we underwent an unhealthy amount of analysis to make sure that what we were proposing could be actually performed and it was feasible. We did analysis in-house, and we also enlisted the support from 5 other subcontractors to support us with the analysis. So a huge undertaking and a huge amount of analysis that went into confirming that the combined tow was possible. But analysis only proves your theory in a theoretical manner. It doesn't actually show you in a practical sense that things can be actually done. So to allow a level of confidence that we could do this in a practical environment, we did some operational simulations at Kongsberg Maritime in Norway, where we gathered all the operational people, which was around 20 to 50 people at a given time, consisted of tow masters, captains, harbour masters who were flown over from Congo itself. And we practiced everything that we were planning to do as part of the operations. This was broken into 2 main activities. One was the inshore hookup, which was the connection of the hawsers from one vessel to another. And then the other was the combined tow to the installation site. So towing it from Point Noir port out and then into the offshore installation location. And the combined tow was broken down into further subcategories as well. And the one main priority that we had was exiting out of Point Noir port and then getting ourselves into a heading that was comfortable for the 2 vessels. For anyone that's operated in Point Noir and in Congo, you'll be familiar with the strong swell that's prevalent there, coming primarily from the one direction. With these 2 large vessels, it was very important that almost immediately upon exiting the port that we went head on to that swell. Otherwise, we would be basically be in a similar situation as our previous companies that tried to perform this operation. So for the simulation, we had 3 bridge simulators, one for the FSU, one for harbor tugs, and one for the anchor handling vessels. Everything was set up in accordance to how we would do it, all with the exception of the background. We didn't have enough time to quite simulate the background of Congo, so what you see there is Norway, but everything else was, in essence, identical to what was going to be experienced live. So then we went on to the operations themselves. So for the operations, we started off with the pre-laying of mooring lines. A different contractor had already pre-installed some anchors, which were, majority were drilled and grouted piles, and some of them were actually drag anchors due to some challenges that the other subcontractor were having. The mooring lines had inline tensioners, which was the stave adjusters, and so we went through generally quite a standard operation of installing mooring lines from an anchor handling vessel. The drag anchors were actually part of our work scope, so because of the challenges the other contractor were having, E&I requested that we install some drag anchors. They were 66-ton Stavrex anchors, so I think they were about 35-ton anchors, but with added ballasts, increasing it to 66 tons in total. We installed these anchors using a 2-vessel solution, so effectively one vessel pulling the anchors off the initial vessel and then collectively lowering the anchors down to seabed. And then due to the force needed to embed the anchors, it was a tandem pull using 2 vessels to achieve the load that was required to embed the anchors into the seabed. From there, we went to Luanda and we offloaded the FLNG unit that was dry towed from Dubai. A semi-sub heavy lift vessel dry towed it from Dubai over to Luanda. 2 vessels, Sapphire and Prosper, if I remember correct, offloaded it from the semi-sub vessel. So as you may be aware, the semi-sub effectively submerges the deck and then the unit becomes then floating for the anchor handlers to effectively pull off, and then the deck then arises and the transport vessel then moves away. We then towed the unit from Luanda over to Congo, and it was in Congo that I especially experienced firsthand that swell and what that could mean to our combined tow had we approached or exited the port of Point Noir in the wrong heading. And as you can see here, the sea itself looks relatively calm, but you can see the effect the swell has on the vessel. And with an effective 4-meter separation between the FSU and FLNG, had the combined units experienced a swell similar to that, or a roll similar to that, it would have most definitely resulted in a catastrophe. We then moved on to the hawser installation, and the primary reason why we moved this operation inshore. You can see all the hawsers were pre-installed onto beams in a predetermined manner to allow the installation of these in a predefined sequence, because the hawsers were effectively a spider web, basically on top of one another. You can see from the video, hopefully it plays, how slow the operation was, and further cements the reason why we needed to move this to an inshore location, because although it's not the North Sea and we're not exposed to high waves in Congo, we did still have a very short operability window to be able to install these. And in fact, it was so short that in reality, we wouldn't have actually seen a window long enough to be able to install the hawsers in an offshore environment. So one of the main reasons why we moved inshore. You can see from these images here what I meant by the spider web of high tension lines. Again, reinforcing the reason why we needed to move these away from an offshore environment to an inshore environment, and all the various installation aids that we needed to install these hawsers. And then the final stage of the pull-in, the human intervention that was needed to be able to secure the hawsers into their receptacles. Now, to do this in an offshore environment with lines under very high tensions was a huge risk that we were not willing to take, and that was the reason why we moved away from the conventional method and employed a method that was less conventional and perhaps the first time achieved on vessels that large. So once the hawsers were installed, we were then ready to tow the 2 units from Point Noir into the offshore installation location. So as I mentioned, we needed to exit the port, which is a very busy port. Was not shut down like we were told it would be, so it was still in operation with other vessels using the port as they would do. And then we needed to get into our tow heading, which was head to the prevailing environment, plus minus 15 degrees relative to the heading, to the incoming waves and swell. It wasn't like any typical tow. We weren't pulling the units down to their location. The units were effectively being crabbed down. So we couldn't adjust that heading. We needed to maintain that heading, and so it was more of a crabbing down to the final installation location. So the tow occurred in about 1 knot speed and took around 12 hours duration in a weather window of approximately 48 hours. The tow was performed with 4 of the 5 Solstad vessels that were named earlier, and then we had the 2 support tugs following the tow all the way. The tow in Point Noir port, there's a short channel that we had to maintain due to the draft of the larger FSU, and that channel we had to use to exit the port, adding further complexity to exiting the port itself. Once we exited the port, and my little cartoon character of the vessels has disappeared, we adjusted the vessels, so we exited the port using the harbor tugs. We then went to the handover location, handed over to the Solstad vessels, anchor handling vessels, and then we started our tow down to the offshore site. Once we were in our location, we assumed our station keeping positions. We connected up 2 vessels to the anchors on the seabed and used them as live anchors, using the winches on the aft deck of the vessel as a means of controlling the FSU and the FLNG tensions and maintaining their positions, while the 5th anchor handling vessel went around, collected the pre-laid mooring lines, and then connected up to the FSU and FLNG. That vessel then went around all the various step adjusters that were subsea and on the seabed and performed the tensioning operations around. It was a 2-round tensioning operation to achieve the required tensions. At the very end of the operations, we had a bonded riser that we needed to install between the FLNG and the riser platform to allow our client to achieve their very important first gas, all done within the period that they requested. So they achieved their first gas on the 28th of December, and our project was completed. Operationally, it was completed within 6 months. So from the start of the detailed engineering to the completion of the hookup operations was done within 12 months, and our final vessel demobilized from Congo at the start of the year in 2024, 5th of January. So that is my slides, and here is a very short video of our operations that we performed, which will hopefully summarize what I've just gone through. There's no sound, but it's just music, so it doesn't really matter. And it just gives you a little bit of a perspective of the scale of the project and what we did. This part of the video gives a very good perspective of the hawsers and exactly why we decided to move it from an offshore environment to an inshore. You just get a good perspective of exactly what we were dealing with. And you see exiting the port, it's how busy and congested it is to be able to maneuver those two units. So I think the operational simulation proved invaluable for this. It allowed the guys who were performing this to just get familiar with what they needed to do. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Syed.
No problem, thank you.
Yeah. We've got any questions for Syed? Nobody's leaving. There we go. Come on. Thanks, Chris.
Cheers, excellent. It's really good to see it on the screen like that. How many projects between now and 2030, I mean, we had Paul's conversation earlier about anchor handlers, you had 5 from the North Sea or thereabouts on that contract. Between now and sort of 2030, how many more kind of projects would you say like this that need that volume of anchor handlers would you?
I think this one was quite unique in the way that, in the sense of the sheer volume of anchor handlers that were needed at any one time. So certainly for me, I've not experienced any other projects that needed such a large volume of anchor handlers to perform one task at one time simultaneously. There have been, since that project, we personally, our company have had a good handful of other projects where we've needed alternative anchor handlers, but more in the Norwegian Sea rather than in the North Sea or internationally. We do see a large volume of tenders coming through with the requirement for mooring installation needed, but again, it's not to the same volume of anchor handler requirements. It's usually at most 3, I would say. But,
I think more in the international market, where you have the long tows, it's more your towing contractors as well that make up that bulk if you have 3 towing vessels or whatever. In this case, as Syed said, it was quite unique because they had the target for first oil or first gas, which always puts the pressure on. You had a contractor that was installing piles, which the piles weren't going in, so then you introduced drag anchors, then there was step tension. So all of a sudden you had all these things that didn't exist in the planning phase. So I think the reaction was to say, right, let's just get the 5 biggest boats you've got and just get it done. And that's what they did.
Yeah. And I think we were quite lucky to be able to get those vessels from the one supplier rather than going out to various suppliers. So that certainly helped. Something from the previous slides, from the previous presentation, we wouldn't be able to do now because 2 of those vessels no longer are in the North Sea. So one of them's gone to Brazil and another one's in somewhere else. So yeah, it would definitely be a lot more challenging now to be able to achieve that project.
Excellent, thanks. Any more questions? One thing I'll just add as well, the towmaster simulation. I don't know, there's quite a few towmasters in the room here I see, but in all my years working with towmasters and as a towmaster, that's the first time I'd ever had the opportunity to do that, and it really is invaluable.
It's absolutely invaluable. Yeah. I think the benefit of doing operational simulations not only familiarizes whoever's doing the operations to what they're doing, but allows you to make the mistakes without the repercussions of those mistakes in a real lifetime, So that proved invaluable. I think there was a lot of benefit gained from this. I know from the feedback from the towmasters, although, very experienced and they've done this a million times, maintaining a strict heading is always quite difficult. And yeah, it was definitely money well spent.